Some stories start with a choice, others start with a refusal. This story begins when one man decided he would go to war, but he would never carry a weapon. In 1942, as the world was engulfed in the flames of World War II, a quiet young man from Virginia named Desmond Thomas Doss stood in line to enlist in the US Army. He wasn't a rebel or a coward, and he wasn't trying to make a political statement. He just had a simple, unwavering belief. Taking a human life, any human life, was fundamentally wrong. Desmond grew up in a poor, deeply religious family. A violent argument between his parents that he witnessed as a child left a lasting mark on him. Later, a simple image from the Bible depicting the 10 Commandments shaped his conscience forever. For Desmond, the commandment "Thou shalt not kill" wasn't a suggestion, it was absolute. So, when the war came, Desmond didn't run from it. He felt it was his duty to serve his country, but he made a decision that would define his entire life. He would serve without ever touching a gun. The army was baffled. They had no idea what to do with a man like him. From the very first day of boot camp, Desmond faced relentless mockery, insults, and humiliation. His fellow soldiers labeled him a coward. His superiors saw him as a liability, a problem that needed to be solved. How could a soldier who refused to carry a rifle possibly survive on a battlefield? How could he protect his comrades, let alone himself? Desmond didn't argue or shout. He didn't defend himself with words. Instead, he made a simple request: to serve as a combat medic. A medic didn't carry weapons. A medic carried bandages, morphine, and a sliver of hope. A medic's job was to run toward the wounded while everyone else was running for cover. Still, the harassment was brutal. Soldiers threw boots at him while he prayed. They threatened him, trying to break him psychologically. Some even tried to have him court-martialed for insubordination. Through it all, Desmond endured in silence. He believed that true courage wasn't proven by how hard you could strike back, but by how much pain you were willing to carry without letting it turn you bitter. Eventually, the army ran out of options. They couldn't break him, and they couldn't discharge him. So, Desmond Doss was sent overseas, not as a soldier with a rifle, but as a medic, armed only with his faith. And soon, that faith would be tested in the most extreme way imaginable, on a blood-soaked cliff in Okinawa. It was a place the soldiers would come to call Hacksaw Ridge, a place where men died in seconds, and where one unarmed man would single-handedly redefine the meaning of heroism forever. Okinawa, 1945. The island was small, but what waited there was enormous. Hacksaw Ridge wasn't just a battlefield, it was a vertical nightmare. A jagged cliff, rising nearly 400 feet above the ocean, crowned with caves, machine gun nests, and enemy soldiers who had sworn to fight to the last breath. To reach the top, American soldiers had to climb cargo nets under withering fire. Men were shot before their boots even touched solid ground. Bodies fell backward into the sea below. And in the middle of all this, one man, Desmond Doss, climbed without a weapon. When the fighting began, chaos swallowed everything. Explosions tore the ground apart. Bullets screamed through the air like angry insects. Smoke turned the day into an apocalyptic night. Orders dissolved into pure instinct. Men fell everywhere, their cries lost in the thunder of war. Desmond did what he had trained to do. He ran toward the wounded. He dragged broken bodies out of the line of fire. He pressed bandages into bleeding flesh, his hands stained red. He whispered calm words to men who were certain they were about to die, offering a moment of peace in the middle of hell. Again and again, he exposed himself to enemy fire without a moment's hesitation. Not because he believed he was specially protected, but because he believed every single one of those men was worth the risk. Then, something unexpected happened. The order came to retreat. The ridge had become unholdable. The casualties were overwhelming. The surviving soldiers pulled back, scrambling down the cliff, leaving the battlefield behind, leaving the wounded behind. But Desmond stayed, alone. As night fell, the battlefield became eerily silent. The screams faded into whimpers. The fires burned low, casting long, dancing shadows. Somewhere in that darkness, wounded men lay bleeding, unable to move, waiting for death. Desmond could hear them. He began to move, crawling, searching, listening for any sign of life. Each time he reached a wounded soldier, he whispered the same simple prayer: "Please, Lord, help me get one more." He dragged them, one by one, to the edge of the cliff. Using a rope and a special knot he'd devised, he lowered each man down slowly, carefully, hundreds of feet, to the safety of the soldiers below. One man, then another, then another. The hours crawled by. Bullets whizzed past his head, narrowly missing him. Shrapnel tore into the ground right beside him. At one point, a grenade landed near his feet. Without thinking, Desmond kicked it away just a second before it exploded. Still, he did not stop. His hands bled raw. His muscles screamed in protest. His strength was fading fast. But every time he felt himself about to collapse, he repeated the prayer that kept him going. Just one more. By dawn, something truly extraordinary had happened. 75 men, some reports say fewer, others say more, but the number is staggering regardless, had been saved, rescued from certain death by a single unarmed medic. The very soldiers who once mocked him for his refusal to carry a rifle now looked at him differently. They didn't cheer, they didn't celebrate, they just stood in quiet, profound disbelief. Because on that ridge, surrounded by death and destruction, they had witnessed something incredibly rare. A man who refused to carry a weapon had become the bravest soldier among them all. His story is a powerful reminder that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the greatest strength is found not in the power to take a life, but in the unwavering will to save one. After that night on Hacksaw Ridge, Desmond Doss was no longer the outcast. The very soldiers who had once mocked him now looked to him with respect. They waited for him, not for speeches or apologies, but because they trusted him with their lives. Before the next major assault on the ridge, an extraordinary thing happened. The entire company refused to advance until Desmond had finished his prayers. Officers, anxious about the ticking clock, tried to hurry them along, but the men stood their ground, unmoving. War had taught them a harsh but undeniable truth. If anyone had earned a moment to speak with God, it was the man who had single-handedly pulled them from the jaws of hell. Armed with nothing but his faith, Desmond knelt, said his prayer, and when he stood, the attack began. The battle that followed was even more brutal. The enemy had fortified their positions, and the air was thick with the constant chatter of machine guns and the earth-shattering explosions of mortar. Yet again, Desmond moved through the chaos, a beacon of calm in the storm of violence. And then, it happened. A grenade landed nearby, exploding and sending shrapnel tearing into his legs. He collapsed, severely wounded. As another medic rushed to his aid, Desmond waved him off, insisting, "Go help the others. They're worse off than me." He tended to his own wounds as best he could and waited. Lying there, vulnerable on the battlefield, he was spotted by an enemy sniper. A bullet slammed into his arm, shattering the bone. The pain was immense, but even then, his instinct was to help himself so that others wouldn't be put at risk. In an act of incredible resilience, he grabbed a discarded rifle and used its stock to create a makeshift splint for his broken arm. Then, refusing all assistance, he dragged himself across hundreds of feet of treacherous terrain to reach the aid station. He was determined that every available medic should focus on those who couldn't help themselves. When the smoke finally cleared, Desmond was evacuated. He had saved dozens more lives while nearly losing his own. But his fight was far from over. The months that followed were filled with surgeries and excruciating pain. A severe infection nearly cost him his legs, and later, tuberculosis claimed one of his lungs. He spent years in hospitals, enduring setback after setback, learning to walk again. Through it all, he never once complained. Whenever someone asked him how he managed to survive such an ordeal, his answer was always the same humble refrain: "I was just doing my job." The US Army, however, saw it differently. They recognized his actions as something far beyond the call of duty. In 1945, President Harry Truman personally presented Desmond Doss with the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military award. He became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive it. Desmond accepted the medal not with pride or triumph, but with quiet humility and gratitude for having been given the chance to help his fellow soldiers. But perhaps the most enduring part of his legacy isn't what he did during the war, but the quiet, humble, and faithful life he lived long after the battles were over. After the war, Desmond Doss returned home. There were no grand parades waiting for him, no long speeches in his honor, and certainly no desire for attention. He simply married Dorothy, the woman he loved, raised a family, and lived a quiet, unassuming life. The same man who had carried his comrades through a storm of fire now spent his days repairing homes, helping neighbors, and faithfully attending his church. Most people who met him in those years never knew what he had done on that terrifying cliff in Okinawa. Desmond rarely spoke about the war. If someone brought up Hacksaw Ridge, he would gently change the subject. He didn't see himself as a hero. In his eyes, he was just someone who had been given a chance to serve, and he tried his best not to waste it. The years rolled on, and his body carried the scars of that battle for the rest of his life. The pain from his injuries was a constant companion, and his health remained fragile, but bitterness never took root in his heart. Instead, what grew was a profound sense of gratitude. Occasionally, the men he had saved would come to visit him. Some brought their children, now grown. Others brought photographs of entire families' generations that existed only because Desmond had refused to give up, whispering to himself, "Lord, help me get one more." He would listen to their stories quietly, a gentle smile on his face, and say very little. In a world that so often celebrates the loudest voices and the most dramatic displays, Desmond Doss showed us something different. He proved that true strength can be quiet, that courage doesn't always need to roar to be heard, and that sometimes the most powerful act is refusing to become what the world demands you to be. Desmond passed away in 2006. He left behind no fortune, no political movement, and no demand to be remembered in monuments of stone. What he left behind was far more precious. He left behind lives. 75 men walked away from Hacksaw Ridge because one man chose compassion over conformity. And even now, decades later, his incredible story still asks us a simple but profound question. When our moment comes, when we face our own personal battlefield, will we choose what is easy or will we choose what is right? This was never just the story of a soldier without a weapon. It was the story of a human being who believed that saving even one life was always worth the cost. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing for more tales of quiet courage.